Ja, men god morgon. Ni ser ju superpigga ut fastän det blev sent för en del igår. Och det är ni, eller hur? Och livestreaming, det är något som tilltalar herrskapet, förstår jag. Superviktigt. Epiphan har vi jobbat med ganska många år och de kommer ju då från egentligen från streaming, frame grabbing och den typen av produkter, och ett kanadensiskt företag. Specialiserat från början mot medical och militärt. Det betyder att man har produkter som verkligen funkar, och det är det vi tycker om med det här företaget. Och George får introducera sig själva. Men de ska idag prata om sina erfarenheter från livestreaming studios. Och det här är ju ett växande industri egentligen med livestreaming. Så att jag hoppas ni får ut något av detta. Ställ frågor när det handlar om detta, för de här killarna vet vad de pratar med om.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Well, you'll have to tell me if that was a good introduction or not, because our Swedish has not come up to par yet. So my name is George, or George. Is that a better pronunciation?
And then I'm also George.
Yeah, yeah. I go by number one George.
No.
Yeah, we've agreed upon this.
I'm the first in the company.
I'm older, so I get number one George. We're both from Epiphan Video, and our company focuses on making live streaming equipment. And George and I are going to tell you about our experience doing live streaming and why we think it is something that you're going to need to care about over the next couple of years, or now, actually. So we have some numbers to show you to show you that companies are thinking about live streaming and they want to invest in it. So this is where you guys are going to come in.
Part of the things we want to share also is our own experience in doing our own live streaming and how we've leveraged it. And so there's a ton of information we're going to talk about in that area, but a bit of history.
That's right. So we all know these new media comes along every couple of years or every year. So in 2005, we had YouTube started, and that started what we now see as like the massive rise of online video. And then 2006, we had Facebook. So we have social media and video exploding over the last decade. In 2015, we have Periscope. And Periscope was the first live streaming platform that really brought live streaming to the masses, right? And so when you combine the fact that we have these platforms and we have the bandwidth to send that kind of video up in a live way, in a good way, now is the time that we can actually start capitalizing on this. So we think it is the next wave of media that you're going to have to deal with. And it's going to be people wanting to build live streaming studios, or people wanting to do live stream their events, or we're going to give you a number of applications where you're going to see how people are going to use live streaming and try to tell you our experiences of how we've sort of found our way through it.
So one of the first things is, I guess, looking at our own adventures in live streaming and how we've been using it and all the things we've learned along the way. And I guess one of the first things we found was that as a company that makes live streaming equipment, a while ago we said, well, we're not doing any live streaming ourselves. How can we be talking about live streaming and trying to educate our customers and our partners and on what and why? So we decided, well, we better start doing this ourselves. And so we kicked off a weekly show, a live streaming show from our studio in Ottawa, Canada, where we decided to figure it out as we went along and experiment and see where it took us.
Yeah, it's a bit like going to see the Special-Elektronik headquarters, where they are using all the technology that they employ and that they advocate for. They're using it. And so we're kind of do the same thing with live streaming. We figured, well, if we need to be able to talk about this to our customers, we need to be able to use it and figure out their pain points and how it all works. So,
and then what we didn't expect was the growth and the interaction that came from that. And so we're going to kind of tell that story a little bit.
That's right.
And then kind of go through that.
So you remember our first show, George?
I do. It was terrible.
Yeah, it was a disaster.
Yeah.
We didn't know what we were doing.
We had no idea what we were doing. We thought, okay, well, maybe we should do it like the nightly news. We'll have a desk, and we'll have a heavily scripted content.
Very formal.
It was boring.
Yeah.
And we had no viewers. Nobody watched, not even our colleagues. No one in the company was watching.
Yeah.
And so we kind of said, okay, well, was that a disaster? Do we stop or do we keep going? And I think everyone here, if you consume any YouTube content or live streaming now, maybe your kids watch Twitch or something like that, you know that the audience isn't there from the beginning. It takes a while to build the audience. So we decided to gamble on it and keep going.
That's right.
And see where it took us.
So this was over a year ago. And then if you switch ahead to the next slide, we basically, since then, we've been going live every week doing a show, and we have figured it out. We now have this show where we get people coming in and interacting with us. And one of the biggest things we learned is we're not the show. We're just part of it because it's a live environment. So we have all these people interacting with us and chatting with us, and they give us the content for this show. So it's a different medium than just doing a video that you happen to do live. You have to change the way you produce content. And the expectations are different from the viewers of a live video broadcast than they are for something that's been pre-recorded. So in good ways and challenging ways that we figured out.
Well, we've done a number of things. We keep changing and upgrading our set so that it looks more interesting. We've made sure to engage with that audience more intentionally. And it's gotten to the point now where we actually have the same consistent viewers and new viewers coming back week after week. And that's a big thing for us, is to make sure that we're engaging with the same audience, but also bringing new content for a new audience week after week.
So like I said, in the first show, we didn't know what we were doing. And then 75 shows in, we kind of figured it out. And it was really hard.
I would hope it was before 75, but
that's right. But we did get the watch time we wanted. We do have the interactivity we wanted. And it's opened a lot of doors for us as a company because we're doing this obviously to sell our own product, but it allows us to do a lot more from the marketing side. So it's been a big benefit for us.
And I think one of the big lessons we learned right away was that it was impossible to do this week after week only on our own products. That's just not reasonable. And it was also boring. I mean, realistically, we could do 5 shows of our own product, run through the entire product line, and then what do we talk about? So very quickly, within probably those first 10 episodes, we figured out, okay, we're going to have to expand a little bit. We're going to have to talk about cameras. We're going to have to talk about maybe even some competitors' devices. And we're going to have to bring in external guests to bring in new and fresh content. And we've done that a number of times now with other industry leaders in different areas. And that's been great for our viewers to get a little bit of feedback from guys at Wowza was a great interview that I really enjoyed. Guys at PTZ Optics was another fantastic interview, and we've been on their show several times as well.
Yeah, so we started out, like George says, our show is called Live at Epiphan, and because our company name is Epiphan, and we go live. And like George says, we were only talking about ourselves, and after a while, when you're only talking about yourselves, it gets kind of boring. I realize there's a certain irony to that as we stand in front of you today, talking specifically about ourselves, but we learned that we need to expand our circle of influence and figure out what makes us tick and what makes our audience engaged. So we just had to learn where we hit and where we miss. And the beautiful thing about doing live video is you get instant feedback from your audience. So people tell you right away they're not interested, or they're asking questions about something that you talked about yesterday, or you literally see the numbers drop on your live viewers because they tune out. So it's a great medium for testing out and getting instant feedback on what to talk about.
And I think that's another big difference between doing it live versus doing a produced and scripted content, pre-recorded and posted, was that we get the different level of interaction. But we're also getting the VOD watch time is the real beauty of it.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages we always tout to our customers who say, why would I bother doing live video? And one of the nice things is you do all your work up front. So you have a lot of pre-production work to make sure it's going to work right, because you don't want to have anything go wrong. But then when you're done, you're absolutely done, and you don't have to invest any more time in post-production. It's completely done. It lives on a social platform or wherever you post this video. So then you get to capitalize on it as a VOD asset as well. So we get a lot of live viewers who watch our content, but then we also have that same piece of content that lives on for eternity on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook platforms.
So you could say it does 2 jobs. We get to play with doing it live, which gives us one element of experimentation. We get the instant feedback through the engagement live. but then we still have this finished piece of marketing material already there with no extra work.
Exactly. Does anybody here do any kind of live streaming? Yeah.
Yes, we heard about that
yesterday.
That's
great. Okay. Yeah. And do you have clients asking about it? Is it something that's coming up in your business? You see? Starting to. Yeah. Okay. That's good. We'll show you some data after to talk about how other companies are thinking about how they're going to use it. So.
And I think this ties in pretty well with some of the talks yesterday as well, especially talking about trends. Some of those things, live streaming is definitely on that list of trends, except I don't think it's a future trend. It's a now trend. And so it's definitely a big one.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we learned early on as well was that we can never take our audience for granted. So every week we try and do something we have never done before. So whether it's so some of these examples we're showing here is we started bringing the comments of the people who watch the show onto the broadcast. And people are simple. They like seeing their name on a program. They like when you talk to them on the program. So just these simple kind of feedback that we can give to our audience really helped. We do goofy things like dress up George and our colleague Dan in Santa Claus hats at Christmas time. And
we had a competition, which I won.
Yes, we've had competitions on yeah.
That trophy hangs at my desk.
So yeah, we do giveaways, we do competitions where George wins, and other kind of gimmicks and stuff just to make the show different every week. Because if it's just two people sitting behind a desk, it gets very boring, even for us. So
I think one of the biggest challenges, and we'll actually be doing this tomorrow as well, is we've also pushed ourselves to expand the boundaries. And so we've tried to do offsite, out of studio live streams. So we've attempted to do it from a moving vehicle in downtown Ottawa. That was a failure. We've tried to do it. We have done it successfully just outside the office in a park setting outside.
Tomorrow night we'll be doing it from
somewhere in Stockholm.
Somewhere in Stockholm with good internet connectivity.
No idea where.
Decent lighting at 9 p.m. at night. It depends on the kind of event that you're doing. So in our case, it's a show. So we think it's crucial for us to do it once a week. But if it's more of an event-based live stream, I don't think it really matters. So it depends on how your social audience expects it. Our audience tunes in. Like we do notice so our show is at 3 o'clock on Thursdays. Eastern time. And at 3 o'clock, there'll be 10 or 30 or people just sitting there waiting for the show to come up. So it's worked for us.
It definitely depends on what the content is, but if you're doing a weekly talk show or anything like that, or Kent could understand this as well, if you're dealing with any sort of routine content, it has to be consistent because people, just like your regular TV program, people have to know when and where to get it at a very precise interval. If it's random, you won't get the same level of viewers because they don't know. It's easier to promote ahead of time because it's always at the same day and the same time. But as you'll see in a couple of slides, it depends on the type of content that you're using the live streaming for. One of the benefits we've seen from building up this live show in that because we now have an audience of our own, it means we have other people who come to us and say, oh, can you guys come on our show? Or can we collaborate on some other marketing activity? Or we get a certain amount of recognition because of it, and it's opened a lot of doors for us. So for example, we're here today because we've had some success on this show, and it gives us a chance to talk to you and talk to more people about our own products. So it's kind of a win-win for us, and it allows us to collaborate with other people who are trying to spread other messages. And being recognized in our peer group as well by other people who do this on a weekly or day-to-day basis, and them using us as an example of how to do things correctly was a bit of a shock, and that happened last June at Infocom in the US, where some colleagues in that space, in that industry, said, these are guys that are doing it as a company perspective, but reaching out to their clients and not just preaching their own products. And they gave us credit for doing that where so few do. And so that was a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting that.
Absolutely. And yeah, it just opens a lot of doors for us. It's really hard as a company to get your customers to talk to you about their stories. If you go to your best customers and you say, we want to be able to tell your story to the world to show how great we are. That's really what you're asking of them. Most people don't have time for that, but if you can show them that you have an actual audience to preach to, then they might be more interested. So it's been good for us.
And another trade-off is, when you go to some of these trade shows, whether it's Infocom or IBC last week where I was, you get people come by the booth and they say, I recognize you. I've seen you on YouTube. Can I get a selfie or something strange like that? No autographs yet, but it's a little strange at first, but it does help again with that engagement. People recognize you instantly, and then you can engage in a conversation about the products. They might not know anything about the products, but they've seen my face or George's face, and they recognize us right away, and so it becomes part of the brand recognition.
So people, to just kind of summarize what we're talking about, people ask us why we do this show. The biggest thing, obviously, is to grow our own brand awareness. So we make live streaming equipment, and we want other people to buy that equipment. So that's a very basic fundamental we're going for. It gives us a chance to provide thought leadership. So what I mean by that is if we can speak to our own successes with live streaming, it gives our company a bit of credibility so people can understand, okay, these guys kind of know what they're talking about at least.
Customer empathy.
That's a big one for George, especially because he's the manager of our support team.
Yeah, so that one's a big one because sometimes on our live show, things don't go correctly.
Often.
And, well,
no, it's true, but it makes it kind of exciting that way, right?
That's part of being live is you never know what's going to happen. But it also means that if something goes wrong during the show, we can turn around and sometimes we'll get instant comments saying, this same thing happened to me when I was trying to go live. How do I solve it? And we're trying to solve it live during the show. And so that helps us connect to that customer a little better, share that empathy a little bit, understand what they're going through so that as a company, we can hopefully improve our products and find new ways to help our customers understand these issues and solve them.
Yeah, and the truth is we've actually found countless issues with our own hardware that we report back to the development team and we say, guys, we implemented it this way, but we've been using it for a month and it doesn't work or it doesn't work the way we expected. So it allows us to evolve our own product line just because our CEO has this expression, at some point you have to eat your own dog food. And what he means by that is if you're a dog food company, eventually you have to start eating your own dog food and figuring out if it tastes good or not. So we're kind of going through that exercise by doing this live show.
Well, let's be honest. Engineers aren't necessarily the best people to know what customers want. They're great at doing their job, but they're maybe not the best at understanding the customer's day-to-day use. And that's really where engaging in this way has helped bridge that gap. The other thing that we can do is have some fun. One of our most popular shows was one where we decided to destroy some of our own products. We filmed that at George's house because it had a selection of ways we could creatively destroy some of our products. And we actually get a lot of attention for this. I think there's probably a few people in this room who've seen that episode. It was a long one. It was about an hour long, which we originally started this live show idea thinking that we could always do it 15 minutes. And it's evolved to probably be an average of 30 to 40 minutes every week now. But I think that's one of the lessons learned is don't have expectations. Things will change.
Yeah, but that was a great fun. So we make these devices called capture cards. And we always talk about how they're really durable. And so we said, let's do a live show about it and put it to the test. Now, it was frightening for us because we didn't know if we wanted to basically test our equipment, try and destroy it and see if it worked. But we didn't actually know if it was going to work. And it could have been a complete dismal failure where none of them ever worked and they all broke and it proved that our products were made of garbage.
But this was the point of doing it live, was that we didn't prepare any of this ahead of time. We didn't trial any of the methods of destruction we attempted to see what would happen. We just did it live, crossed our fingers, and hoped for the best. And it worked. Yeah. It worked very, very well.
Some of it. It was kind of like a Mythbusters episode where we hit it with a sledgehammer. We went swimming with it. We drove over it. We set it on fire.
Drove over with a motorcycle, a car.
Hockey. We played hockey with it.
Or Canadians have to play hockey with it. That
so
was
does
mandatory.
Swedes. So we're on the same page there.
Threw it off the roof.
We don't have to say ice hockey, not like we're in the United States.
But we basically used 4 devices and tortured them in all these different ways and went to look at which ones worked. All of them worked after all of these different tests, including the one that we went swimming with and then set on fire to dry it out. Yeah. That one actually worked. It didn't work immediately. It worked the next day after it dried out a little more, but it was still a fully functional device. And so then as part of this, we decided, well, I mean, these are obviously now unsellable, so let's give them away. They're they're either going to end up in our own personal museum, or we can do something to engage with our audience and give them away. And people got really excited about that idea.
Remember, we took them to NAB as well.
We did.
And we have this beautiful display at NAB with all of our products looking shiny. But all anyone would come up and say, "Can we see the ones that you burnt and destroyed?" And
we had them under
so
a glass table.
they turned out to be the star of the show. So
people loved it.
They did,
especially this one. That was the one we hit with a sledgehammer.
Yeah,
it was very flat.
Yeah.
So why does live streaming matter? That's a big thing. That's the big question.
That's right. And so for this next part, there was a study done by a company called Brand Live and some other little company called IBM. And they did they interviewed over 200 companies in, I think mostly in the United States, about their intent on live streaming. And this is what I found very interesting. Almost all of these companies see live streaming as either important, very important, or a top priority. So it shows that it is not just an emerging technology and that it's here now. Most of them want to invest in this now. So these are big companies with $100 million in revenue. And almost all of them are streaming now. But what's nice for you guys is that quite a lot of them are streaming, but they haven't figured it out yet. They're using cell phones, they're using some kind of technology that they've got working for it, but it's not really at the point where everybody has professional equipment, and they're still trying to solve that last piece of the puzzle. Like, how do I take this from the hacky setup that we've got with cell phones and a bit of software? They're doing it one way, but we're going to evolve into that space where people are going to have like rigorous, tested live streaming equipment where it's not going to be flaky. And they're going to need people like you to help them get set up with that equipment. So their budgets will increase, which means they're going to want to spend money on this. So it's going to be important that you have solutions for them to say, yes, I know how to set that up. We know what kind of equipment works for it, and we could be able to make recommendations. So.
And that's a big thing. I mean, part of it is it might be in an environment just like this where it's a conference, and they might be starting with someone sitting in the back of a room doing it with their smartphone or maybe a laptop with a webcam, and that's not going to offer the best experience for those remote viewers. We could very easily, we've been recording the sessions in these rooms yesterday and today using our equipment, but we could have very easily just provided that a network connection and done a live stream of it as well, using the exact same Panasonic PTZ camera to give it that much higher quality image. And that's probably where a lot of these businesses are going to be going, is leveraging their existing conferencing equipment and just making sure to live stream that content by adding another piece or two to complete the package.
Yeah, because it's really just, if you're setting up a live streaming studio, it's no different from any other kind of video studio or environment like this, but you need to handle the media at the other end of it. What are you going to do with it at the end, and make sure you have enough bandwidth to get it up. And then have an operator like Carl, who's his whiz, who can understand how to actually handle that stream and where to send it.
So how are they doing it today, and where is it going, I guess, is the big,
yeah, so
the
these are
question.
basically some of the common applications that we're seeing.
We're probably all familiar with Apple doing their product launches that they live stream all the time. Google does the same thing. That's a pretty obvious one, but a great example of how to do it at a very high level, where you're getting millions and millions of viewers live for these events who can't possibly attend it in person, but they feel as though they're getting that in-person experience because of the level of production quality.
It's because it's newsworthy that it makes sense as live content. If you have an opportunity or something that's new for your business or your company, it makes sense to live stream that because it's going to feel more exciting for the viewer at home as opposed to some polished VOD content. They're going to get to see it live just like everybody else. So.
And the viewer retention is longer because they don't know what's coming next necessarily. They have to keep viewing. Whereas VOD, they can skip around, and,
that's true.
And they you don't get the same watch time, and watch time can be big.
Yeah, and it's not just us who think that a live experience can be better, but Facebook prioritizes live content. So they will often push it out to viewers at the top of their timelines, or they'll notify you with a notification that so-and-so is going live right now. So it's good for your businesses to go live because you'll get a higher ranking on some of these social sites.
The other way of doing it is just simply for internal communications. And this is probably one of the first ways that a lot of larger businesses are starting with live streaming. It's not even necessarily to their customers and to the public, but just internally. Within multiple offices scattered around the globe, they might need to do a CEO's announcement or some internal product launch, or maybe it's just a team building exercise or whatever it might be. But doing that live internally on their own network, or maybe they're sharing that with the public. There's a lot of different ways of handling that. And I think a lot of companies start with that and expand it out afterwards as well.
Yeah, I think the sort of between normal corporate communications and live streaming, I think that's all going to get blurry over the next couple of years, where I don't even know if we'll call it live streaming or if we'll call it internal comms. It's just going to get kind of overlap.
The other way you can do it, which doesn't always work out, is Q&A and ask me anything style of videos. So this example in particular, some guy named Mark did a live stream from his backyard. It did not work out for him. It failed pretty terribly, but he got a ton of viewers, and it changed people's perspective of him a little bit. Of course, he then ruined that a little while later, trying to sit in front of Congress. But it was a great example of to humanize a company or a product and an individual by taking them out of the boardroom, if you will, and exposing them as a normal person. Even when it goes wrong, sometimes even bad press is good press.
Behind the scenes content. So this was a video that we shot on Monday, and live streaming is a great opportunity to share the content that's not normally shared. So it's quite obvious that you might live stream an event like this, but what might also be interesting is if you're live streaming the content around an event. So in the hallways before a show, you might be interviewing people about when they're getting ready to go live. We see a lot of live streaming at a concert. They'll do some stuff backstage, or they'll do some stuff with the fans on the side, because with the way our broadcast and OTT networks work, there's not a lot of room for that peripheral content. So we see live stream kind of filling in the gaps around the main event. It's just one of the things that I've noticed a lot of it.
Yeah, and even from our own experience, we've done them where we've, again, as an experiment, set up a very mobile rig and walked around a trade show floor, interviewing other companies in their booths and showing their products. That one worked, actually. That one worked really well.
Yeah.
Somehow. That was pure luck. But, we were able to do that, and it was a very behind-the-scenes look where a lot of people can't travel to some of these larger trade shows. And so to be able to walk the floor and live stream that and our experience, our commentary, and of course our interviews meant that a lot of our viewers were maybe in that instance couldn't travel to Las Vegas, were able to see a small piece of what some of these big shows are all about, because it's kind of a closed world to a lot of people.
Yeah, you're kind of letting them peek behind the curtain a little bit. And it's very candid as well, so people enjoy that.
Interviewing robot Abe Lincoln was an interesting one.
What was that again? It
was while we were walking around. It was an AI robotic Abraham Lincoln.
Was it a good interview?
No, it was weird.
Like that interview we saw in yesterday's presentation.
Exactly. How to live stream.
Yeah, so we won't dive into this very much because it's kind of a more technical discussion. And we have a booth set up outside, and you can come see us there if you're interested in sort of some hardware setups. We've set up our own studio in our office where we have it kind of locked down, and we have a great bandwidth connection, and we do a lot of switching between cameras and sources and stuff like that.
And we have set pieces we can change out. We have a green screen we can bring in to add an extra depth if we want to share a particular piece of content that way, or we can take that out and just have a more interesting set behind. And so we can use these to help make the content a little more dynamic and a little more interesting, and not the same boring thing day after day.
Yeah, I can kind of see two live streaming setups that people are going to want to need. Sort of a mobile video cart setup where they can take it on the run and just go wherever they need, or the in-situation studio environment.
And I guess here comes the part where we preface it with, this is a little bit of a mention of some of our own equipment, but we look at it as kind of there's two main ways to really do live streaming today. One way is to use a dedicated piece of hardware, which we do make some of those, where you don't really need to do a lot of extra work. It's a dedicated appliance that'll bring in those video and audio signals, do all of the encoding, compression, live streaming and recording, all at the same time on a single device. It's basically exactly what we're doing in this room right now to record these sessions. That gives you the advantage of you don't have to worry about software going down or a computer going down, and you can usually be a little bit more flexible in what you do. So a device like this example, our Pearl Mini, can encode 2 separate HD streams at the same time. So you might do one as a mixed and switched program feed and another one as an ISO recording at the same time. And that can be a challenge in the other scenario where you might use a capture card and a computer and software. Totally valid solution, but it introduces a lot of moving pieces and potentially some reliability problems. We make both types of products, so I won't say necessarily that one is worse than the other, but there are some things to keep in mind when looking at those.
Yeah, they're both. A lot of people are always asking us, do you recommend a software streaming approach where I do everything over a computer, or do you use a dedicated piece of hardware? And it really depends on your customer. So if you have a customer who's really great at IT and computing, maybe they can handle the software side of it, and they don't mind futzing around with their computer settings and doing updates and kind of maintaining a computer to do your live streaming. But for a lot of customers, they want their live streaming setup to be in a closed room and they never want to have to interact with it. In which case you might want a piece of hardware that's dedicated to that you know is not going to act like a normal Windows computer and suddenly try and do updates, or it's going to be just a lot more work to maintain. So the advantage I see of a dedicated piece of hardware is that you're not going to have to invest as much time in maintaining it.
And for the enterprise level, I think that that's probably the best solution. This is maybe a little more flexible in the sense that using capture cards with software also means that maybe they're just trying to get a better video signal into their unified communication system. They just want something better to go into Adobe Connect beyond a webcam. And so using capture cards can give you that, but then at the same time you could load software like Wirecaster, vMix, or OBS and do your live streaming from that same sort of infrastructure. So lower cost of entry for a capture card and maybe a little bit more flexible for some people, but introduces a lot of moving pieces. And so the dedicated hardware is going to be a little more reliable. And sometimes you can stick it in the closet in a rack and ignore it and it'll just do its thing. So there's a few different ways, but we're happy to discuss that at our table and show you some of that hardware.
Yeah, so that's pretty much us. Yes, we have a question. Exactly. That's Absolutely. What we tell all our customers. It's the first thing we say. Is the video part is kind of the easy part, but the thing is it's no different from any video production in that capacity. So live streaming or any production, you're going to want to have great video and good lighting. Doesn't have to be great, but it has to be good, and good sound. Audio.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it badly and you just won't retain viewers.
Yeah.
But if you invest, honestly, not a large amount of money, anyone can go buy a fancy camera. But it takes the extra lighting, the extra audio to make sure that the entire production is high quality. And I don't think that really necessarily has to be a big expense in order to do that. It's just choosing the right products and obviously consulting with experts and making sure that you're selecting the correct products for that.
Does anybody else have any questions about what we're talking about today? Yeah. There's a whole world of, once you push the stream up, there's a lot of things you can do with it. There's certain platforms that are dedicated to just pushing it out to many streams at the same time. So I could send it to a platform like Switchboard, and from there, they will then send it out to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, wherever you want it to go, any kind of CDN. So our live show, we broadcast to Facebook and YouTube. And in truth, it works really well on YouTube. And Facebook, it's just another item in someone's timeline. So for the format that we do for our live show, Carl, it's well suited for YouTube, but it depends on your content.
We experiment with that though. We've tried Twitch. You know, Twitch is primarily a gaming oriented content right now. That's evolving on their platform, and maybe someday you know, it will make more sense for us to use Twitch again. We've experimented with Vimeo, partly because we're partnered with them. And so when we were talking about that on the show, we tried to use that at the same time. And it's maybe a great choice if you're doing an enterprise level live stream where you want a little extra control. You want to be able to maybe put a paywall in front of it if it's an event where you need that. There are platforms for that, like Vimeo. But if it's just a basic, like what we do week to week, then Facebook and YouTube are probably the best options. And obviously they come at a great low price of being free. So
So how much time would you say you put into preparation for each episode?
Depends. I'd say at least a day. A day of prep work, figuring out how to talk about the content. So for example, tomorrow's show that we're going to do in Stockholm, we don't exactly know what we're going to talk about yet. It's going to be one of the ones where we fly more by the seat of our pants, but we'll talk about our experience here today. Maybe we'll bring up some footage that we take from this, and we'll talk about that, and we'll walk around Stockholm and see if we can conjure up some stories. So it's kind of like being a journalist where you have to sort of craft a story out of what you have around you. We
try to plan the subjects several weeks in advance, maybe even months in advance, so we know a rough outline of what we want to do, and we do that maybe once a month. We sit down and we say, okay, for the next X number of weeks, we're going to try and do these subjects, and then the days leading up to that one, we sit down again and try and fine tune that and draft up a rough outline. But we move away from the heavily scripted part, and that actually saves a lot of time and effort and makes the live experience more interesting. Sometimes.
Yeah. Not often, but
no, it's usually something that's more background where we'll bring it up and talk about it as we're showing it. So for example, if we were just at an event, we might show some video content that we filmed during that event and talk about it. So it doesn't become the primary piece. We're not just live streaming something pre-recorded. We're actually doing a commentary about that piece.
It's both. It depends on our setup. Sometimes we might spend half a day or a day getting the technical setup. If we're trying to go off-site and do something remotely, we'll spend a lot of time. Or if we're trying to bring in a third and fourth camera to do something, we can spend a lot of time doing that.
I think part of it is because we experiment a lot. We change our studio setup fairly frequently. If we had a single fixed studio setup, then that would be very turnkey and we wouldn't have to spend any time on setting that up. It would all be content planning. But because we like to play around with the stuff and introduce new elements, then yeah, sometimes there's a little more of the technical setup. You know, maybe only an hour or two before the show goes live, hopefully sooner than that, but sometimes it doesn't happen.
Quite a bit more, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think our first few shows, you know, the production quality was lower. The quality of the content was much lower. And we probably spent several days planning for that. And as we've gotten better at it, it's gotten easier and easier. And we've been able to collaborate with more members of our team, but also people outside the company as well. When we bring them in as guests, we can kind of give them a rough outline and just see where the conversation takes us. So some of that takes some work. Some of it's pretty easy.
When I speak with people who are just getting started with live streaming, I always say, keep your setup as simple as you can, because something's going to go wrong no matter what. So single camera, a decent audio source, and a single light or something like that. Because a lot of people try to get complex quickly, and then something bad
You're never going to be a
happens.
Success out of the door anyways, so you might as well keep it fairly simple at first, just to get used to it, just to get comfortable with it, and build up as you go.
But one of the nice things we found is that our audience is very forgiving when things go wrong. They kind of like that about live. When the light suddenly falls down in front of the camera, it doesn't look very professional, but it kind of makes it more interesting because it's a bit exciting. So they're more forgiving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People love fail videos. So, you know, so anything that can go wrong is fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, I would say you can definitely get away with a lower quality camera. I mean, you could get a $200 handycam and be effective with that. The lighting and the audio was definitely the bigger challenge for sure. We actually do most of the time our show, we use a single shotgun mic to in our studio. But again, we've fine-tuned the position. We have one guy in the company who's an audio engineer. Start of every show, we have him come in and double check everything and just make sure that it all makes sense in case someone maybe moved that microphone 6 inches that, you know, totally ruins the audio experience. We make sure that all the levels are in check and that two people have looked at it just to make sure that things make sense. So that maybe takes 2-3 minutes, but it's very important to make sure that it, you know, it's consistent and that we know it's been checked and looked at.
Any special tools used for the interactivity with audience?
Yes, and we've changed that over time. It used to be that sitting at our desk in the studio, we would just, one of us would have a laptop open and we would just have 2 browser tabs open, one with the YouTube chat and one with Facebook chat, and you try to monitor both. And we often have colleagues at their desks doing moderation just in case. You never, with live, again, even with, if you allow live chat, you never know where that live chat's going to go. So you usually want to have some sort of moderation. But now we've actually implemented a new experiment where we're using an external computer that's aggregating all that chat and actually feeding it into our encoder, and we can actually bring it up as an overlay. So if there's a particular question that someone's asking during the show, we can select that and bring it up on screen and then address the question. So that's actually been great for a lot of our viewers. They get that little bit of a shout out because they see their name on screen, and they're not just lost in the stream of chat.
Is there a next step in your show that you know that this is what we're going to do and this is where we're going to end up with the show and the interactivity?
With interactivity?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things is we don't really have much of a plan in terms of a long term. We're just kind of, as we learn new things and as new products come into the market, if we can implement them and bring them into what we're doing, then we try it and see how it goes. You know, right now what we're using to do that chat, for example, is not the cleanest system, and so it would be nice to have something maybe a little simpler and not involve so many pieces.
Another thing that we need to sort out is when we bring in a Skype guest or a remote guest, it's okay, but it's not great. So we need to figure out how to bring in a really great quality live feed with no latency so you can have a good conversation with them. So that's one of the puzzle pieces that I want to sort out.
Yeah, multi-site streaming is one of the biggest challenges. We, not on our weekly live show, but sort of in a total separate experiment that we did in a few of us in sort of our private lives. We did a charity motorcycle ride back in the summer in Ottawa. And Dan and I tried to live stream while we were riding, and we tried to do a multicam YouTube stream. I don't know if any of you have seen that before, but the viewer can choose which camera they want to watch. And somewhere along the line, something happened in the YouTube back end and it didn't work. And so we ended up on 2 separate stream events on YouTube instead, which was okay. People could still choose, but it wasn't in a single player. So trying to streamline some of that. And I think leveraging that type of technology where if you have a multi-stream, maybe it's multi-site, where people can choose which view they want to see, and there's more and more technologies coming out to help with that. There's a few CDNs now that will allow that, and I think that's interesting way to go forward as well.
Another one we haven't really nailed yet is polling as well. So we can poll our audience and get active results right on the screen. And we've experimented with that, but we haven't found a super clean solution where it doesn't require them to go to a specific site to vote and stuff like that.
We have spoken to some people who make technologies who do that kind of thing. And we've interviewed them, and they're very early stages of building that in as extra plugins and things like that. So that's kind of a growing area as well that's interesting. So anyone can do a straw poll, but that's kind of boring. Well, exactly. And most of the time, most people who are using Twitch and bringing in that level of interaction, they're usually using an outside service, whether it's Streamlabs or something else, to bring that in and feed it into their stream. So it still requires multiple pieces. So I think long term, it'd be nice to see more of that built in a little more naturally, make it a little easier and less cumbersome to work with. Any other questions?
Okay.
Great.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.